They say that the plant kingdom is always peaceful, all leaves and a bunch of flowers, nothing really dangerous. But what they don't know is that under the beauty and glamour of towering trees and elegant flowers lie a few plant species who woke up and chose violence. We are of course talking about carnivorous plants, like the famous Venus flytrap and pitcher plant, who instead of choosing to sit there and soak in sunlight and water, chose a different path to get their nutrients. But before we get into that, we first need to understand why exactly these plants are carnivores, when basically every other plant species outside this small group function without the, carnivore part. First and foremost, this carnivorous aspect is derived from evolution and adaptation. Generally, carnivorous plants grow in bogs or swamps where the soil is acidic and lacks vital nutrients for regular plant growth, like hydrogen and phosphorus. Specifically with nitrogen though, these help plants make essential molecules like proteins and enzymes, which, somehow, insects are a concentrated source of, which makes carnivory less about aggression, and really more about survival in extreme environments where other plants would perish. On top of that, contrary to popular belief, carnivorous plants actually still do rely on photosynthesis like normal plants. The only difference is that they don't rely on it 100% of the time, and their ability to trap prey gives them an edge in an otherwise impossible habitat. With all that being said, we can finally dive into this wonderfully weird world of carnivorous plants. We begin with arguably the most famous carnivorous plant on the list, the Venus flytrap. Venus flytraps are primarily found in the wetlands of North and South Carolina. However, they are considered vulnerable in the wild due to habitat loss and overharvesting. So I'm sure most of you know what a Venus flytrap is, and can somewhat picture how one looks like. For starters, its two jaw-like things, which catches insects, are actually modified leaves, and the way it works is actually quite impressive. For starters, inside these modified leaves are hair-like strands that stick out, and when two or more of them are triggered, it will cause the jaw to slam shut, all in less than 1 second. However, to prevent false alarms, the two hairs must be triggered within about a 20-second window. Now that we've gotten how they hunt out of the way, we can talk about how they attract their prey. Venus flytraps secrete sweet-smelling nectar, as well as have a bright, flower-like red coloration inside their traps, which helps attract insects like flies, grasshoppers, and sometimes even spiders. Once an insect is caught, the trap seals up and releases enzymes to dissolve the insect's soft tissue to absorb the nutrients. There is a caveat to this plant though, which is that their traps can only open and close up to around 5 to 7 times before it dies off. And also, despite it having a predatory flair, and contrary to popular belief, as I mentioned earlier, it still does rely on photosynthesis for most of its energy. All in all, the iconic Venus flytrap is a very interestingly weird plant. Even among its other carnivorous plant peers, it stands out uniquely with its one-of-a-kind adaptation and abilities, which, personally, I find very cool. Alright, next up, we have probably the second most famous carnivorous plant, not that there are too many to be honest, and it's the pitcher plant. These plants, unlike the Venus flytrap, can be found all across Asia, the Americas, and even Australia, and their species range varies from small ground pitchers, which only eat small insects, to those large enough to even consume rodents. Pitcher plants primarily have leaves which form a deep pitcher-shaped tube, which is where they get their name from, filled with a digestive liquid which acts as a natural trap. They tend to come in bright colors, with sweet nectar at the opening of their pitcher, drawing insects and in some cases animals inside. Once inside the pitcher, its interior is like a slippery slope, with waxy, sleek walls preventing any escape, causing the prey to slide right into the digestive liquid. Similar to the Venus flytrap, this liquid contains enzymes and bacteria that breaks down its prey, letting the plant absorb its nutrients. With all that being said, pitcher plants are pretty amazing in their own right, from their innate design and their varying sizes, as well as a few species of them having their own distinctive traits. It may not be the flashiest carnivore plant out there, but it does the job of sitting there and waiting for food very well. And just like the Venus flytrap, it's pretty cool. Now then, following the pitcher plants, we have the sundew. Sundews are actually found worldwide, except in Antarctica, but they are more common in Australia, Africa, and Southeast Asia, making them one of the most widespread carnivorous plants in the world. Sundews, unlike the previous two plants, have leaves covered in tiny granular hairs tipped in sticky droplets. And these said droplets apparently glisten like dew in the sun, which is how they got their name, sundews. These droplets, apart from glistening though, are imperative to luring and trapping insects, and is actually sweet but really sticky. So the way sundews work is pretty interesting. In fact, Charles Darwin, Mr. Evolution himself, called them the most wonderful plants in the world after seeing how they moved, which probably says a lot. Basically, once their prey lands on it, their hair slowly curl around it, holding it tight like a living net, while the hair which the unsuspecting prey landed on, as mentioned earlier, being really sticky, effectively immobilizes them, while the sundew slowly curls around them, leading to the prey, mostly insects, inevitable end. And yeah, just like the other carnivorous plants, once the insect is fully wrapped up, the sundew secretes their digestive enzymes to absorb the insect's nutrients. Well, after describing that, I can somewhat understand what Charles Darwin saw in sundews, but personally, I still prefer the OG Venus flytrap. Still though, they are pretty cool. And just a little side story, I saw sundews for the very first time at a florist a couple months back, and they were really way smaller than I anticipated. Not sure what I was expecting, but yeah. Alright, story time is over. Moving on to our final plant, the bladderwort. The bladderwort, compared to any other carnivorous plant, is significantly different, with this plant being their only aquatic species. Similar to the sundew though, it is one of the largest species of carnivorous plant found basically worldwide, just that unlike sundews, they float in ponds, lakes, and wetlands. And yes, they float. Unlike almost any other plant, bladderworts don't have typical roots, which means that they float freely or form tangled mats in the water. Now then, the way this plant hunts, or more like sit and wait, is pretty interesting. They use tiny bladder-like sacs that act as a vacuum trap. Each bladder creates suction by pumping out water, and when a small creature like a water flea brushes against the trap, it snaps open and sucks the prey in. And a quick fun fact here, the speed of their trap is about 1/100th of a second, and yeah, that's actually pretty fast. Personally, I didn't really know anything about this plant until making this video, and just researching how it gets its prey is quite fascinating. The bladderwort is really an incredible plant, from its aquatic nature to the way it hunts, and if I ever get an aquarium or plant tank, I'm definitely gonna try to get my hands on them. They say that nature can be terrifying, but frankly, after taking a look at these carnivorous plants, they aren't exactly wrong. From the Venus flytrap to the bladderwort, every carnivorous plant and all their species in between function differently, but are extremely effective in their environments and thrive where other plants do not. All in all, these plants are pretty incredible, and sometimes it really does make you think about how strange yet fascinating nature can be. With all that being said though, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. It really does help the channel out a lot. Also on a side note, if y'all didn't see the community post, I have some stuff planned for the channel's future, so I hope you'll stick around, cause I promise it's gonna be some good stuff. And with that, thank you for watching.